Welcome to Disturbing Realities. In the prestigious Oakwood Hospital, hidden away from prying eyes, lay a ward where the most vulnerable patients were left to suffer. The ward, known as Ward 13, was home to those with severe mental and physical disabilities, abandoned by their families and forgotten by society, languished in the shadows of humanity's negligence. In the labyrinthine halls of Oakwood Hospital, shrouded in secrecy, lay Ward 13, a place where time itself seemed to rot. The ward smelled of disinfectant and despair. Paint peeled from the walls, revealing cracks like veins of sickness running deep within. Rusty medical equipment leaned against corners, long forgotten, while dirty beds creaked under the weight of skeletal bodies. The dim overhead lights flickered, casting ghostly shadows across the room. Nurses whispered to one another in passing. How much longer can they keep this place hidden? The other replied, as long as the donations roll in, no one will ask questions. As long as we keep our mouths shut, we will not lose our jobs, said another. A young woman, Sarah, lay in a dirty hospital bed, her eyes sunken, her skin pale. Sarah was one of the forgotten. She was a 22-year-old left comatose after a horrific car accident. Her once vivid brown eyes now stared blankly at the stained ceiling. A small collection of faded photographs and tattered stuffed animals were her only companions. Her parents, Mark and Emma, had been frequent visitors at first. They sobbed by her bedside, clutching her limp hand, but over time their visits grew sporadic, until they stopped entirely. The hospital staff never forgot Emma's last bitter words about her daughter. She's gone. Keeping her here is just, we have to move on. We have to leave her here. She is in a coma, and nothing can be done for her. Now, Sarah's care was reduced to the bare minimum. Her body grew frail, her cheeks hollow. Sarah lying on her soiled hospital bed, her pale, gaunt face framed by messy, unwashed hair. The room dimly lit with a sickly green hue. The whispers of neglect were audible, even in the silence of her sterile prison. Sarah was left in a vegetative state after the tragic accident. Sarah's parents, Mark and Emma, had been told that their daughter would never recover, so they decided to abandon her, leaving her to the mercy of the hospital staff. Hospital staff members, dressed in worn-out uniforms, ignoring a patient's cries for help. The patients lying in soiled bed, surrounded by dirty linens and medical waste. Hospital staff ignore their cries as they are cast away by their families. No one cares for them. As the years went by, Sarah's condition worsened, and she became a shell of her former self. The staff had given up on her, and she was left to suffer in silence. The hospital administration had turned a blind eye to the neglect and abuse in Ward 13, more concerned with profits than patient care. The staff avoided Ward 13 whenever they could. Underpaid and overstretched, they took their frustration out on the helpless. I'm not wasting my time changing her sheets. She won't notice, one nurse said. A frail man cried out in pain from a bed nearby, his voice hoarse. Water. Please. Just water. But the nurse walked past, her expression cold as ice. Nearby, an orderly shoved a wheelchair-bound patient back into bed carelessly. If you fall again, don't expect me to pick you up, he said to the helpless patient. Nurses in faded, grimy uniforms walked past patients crying for help. Orderlies roughly handled wheelchair-bound patients, while soiled linens and medical waste pile up in the corner. The walls absorbed their cries, but their echoes lingered, a haunting soundtrack to the ward's misery. Rachel, a young nurse, entered Ward 13, dressed in a crisp uniform, fresh out of nursing school. Her idealism hadn't yet been dulled. Her bright smile seemed out of place amidst the decay. smiling as she tends to a patient. The patients looking up at her with a glimmer of hope. Rachel was very eager to start her career, but on her first day she was horrified by the conditions in Ward 13 and vowed to do everything in her power to improve the lives of the patients. "This isn't care. This is a nightmare," she whispered to herself in utterly disgust. Her first day, she found Sarah. The young woman's wasted frame and the vacant look in her eyes nearly broke Rachel's heart. "Hey, Sarah, I'm Rachel. I'll be taking care of you now," she said, whispering to Sarah. Her voice was like sunlight piercing a storm. For the first time in years, Sarah's lips twitched, a flicker of recognition. Rachel refused to let Ward 13 define her. She worked in secret, bathing Sarah, smuggling in soft blankets, fresh fruit, and flowers to brighten her space. Late at night, she read to her softly, sharing stories of the world outside. Rachel whispered to Sarah, "They think you're gone, Sarah, but I see you. You're still here." And then, one night, Sarah's dry, cracked lips parted. Sarah hoarsely said, "Thank you," Rachel cried, tears of joy, her voice trembling. Rachel said, "You're going to get better." I promised Sarah, lying in bed under a fresh blanket, looking up at Rachel with faint gratitude. Moonlight filters through a cracked window, casting a gentle glow over the scene. With the overall condition of Ward 13, the changes had to be noticed. Rachel's actions were indeed discovered. The hospital administrator, Mr. Johnson, summoned her to his office. He sat behind a large polished desk, his expression smug and condescending. Mr. Johnson said to Rachel, "You've overstepped, Nurse Rachel. Ward 13 doesn't receive resources for such zrania." Rachel's voice turned to steel. Rachel snarled back, "These are human beings, not corpses waiting to be buried. I won't stop." Rachel stood defiantly in front of the stern hospital administrator, sitting at a desk in his cold, sterile office. Her face is lit with determination, while his is shadowed with anger. She turned and walked out, determined to set things right. Rachel went to the authorities, armed with evidence. Investigators swarmed the hospital, uncovering decades of abuse and neglect. One detective shook his head in disgust, saying, "This place is a death sentence, not a hospital." The fallout was swift. Mr. Johnson and other administrators were arrested. Sarah's parents, complicit in her abandonment, were also taken into custody. Investigators went over hospital records under harsh fluorescent lights. Sarah's parents did not escape the wrath of justice. They were arrested, led away in handcuffs, their faces a mix of guilt and disbelief. Ward 13 was dismantled. Sarah was moved to a better facility, where her recovery continued. Rachel stayed by her side, ensuring her story was one of survival, not tragedy. Rachel said, reassuring, "You're not forgotten, Sarah. Not anymore." Sarah sat up in a clean hospital bed, smiling, with Rachel and supportive staff surrounding her. The room is bright and filled with fresh flowers, symbolizing a new beginning, not only for Sarah, but other mental and severely disabled people. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe for more disturbing stories.